What do you say, everybody? And welcome to Monday Quarterback. Mick Gillispie with Jake Coker on assignment today. And for the next hour, we're going to talk Alabama football with you. And it's great to be here on WNSP in Mobile. All right, Alabama and LSU. This has become a playing game for the college football playoff. That's the game we're going to talk about. But we'll look at some of the other action around the SEC over the weekend and kind of the significance of those games as we get set for this weekend slate of activity, including that game in Death Valley, the night game, where it's a kind of a toss-up game. Bama somehow is a 2-point favorite on the road, but LSU is a really good home team. And this has been a rivalry game. And I wonder if that changes at all now that Nick Saban's retired, because it really became a rivalry game due to the fact that Nick Saban had coached at LSU, led them to a national championship, and then left for the NFL and came back to Alabama. People weren't happy about that, at least down in Baton Rouge. People in this state loved it, and Alabama fans, and look at what it turned into. 6 national championships for the Crimson Tide, and one of the greatest runs in college sports history, in college football history for sure. So now that Saban's gone, what's this going to look like? I know for sure it's a big game because both of these teams need this game to stay alive in the college football playoff. Both teams have lost some game, 2 games, 3 games probably isn't going to work, is the math isn't going to get you in. I think the winner of this game wins out, and we'll talk about the schedule that both teams play, but both of these teams went out, and I feel like they're going to win themselves into the college football playoff. Who knows what their seeds are? So for Alabama, the win percentage right now, when you look at this game, 50% against LSU, it's a toss-up. Then they play Mercer. That's a 99.9% chance win. Oklahoma, at Oklahoma, they say 81% Bama wins that one, and then 94.3% that they beat Auburn. That game's always tough, but this one's the one for Alabama where it really is a flip of the coin. And then for LSU, their schedule looks like about the same, right? They're a 50% chance against Bama. Then they go to Florida, at Florida, where they're at 89% chance to win. They play Vanderbilt at home, 74.9%, although do not sleep on Vanderbilt. Auburn found out that this weekend, and then they finish up at Oklahoma. So they play 3 of their final 4 games at home. Bama plays 2 at home and 2 on the road, but 2 tough places. I mean, look, it's Oklahoma's not a gimme. I know they haven't had a great season, but that could be a tough game for Alabama, a team that hasn't really played that great on the road, over the course of the last few years. They did go to Wisconsin and win there earlier this year, but the Wisconsin starting quarterback got hurt at the beginning of the game. So, Alabama took advantage of that. Now, when you look at kind of the way that things are right now, and this could change a lot, but Bama's a 2-point favorite. The over-under is 57.5. You remember last year's game? Boy, it was really exciting. Jalen Milroe had, I thought, his best game as a member of the Alabama team. Even better to me than the performance he had against Georgia, just because he had so many explosive runs against LSU in that contest. They had a really inexperienced secondary, and he ran all over them. Just some amazing runs. It's a 6:30 game in Death Valley, Tiger Stadium, supposed to be 75 degrees, and you can watch it on ABC, right? Or you can listen to it here as well. And we'll preview the game. We always like to promote our show, the Bama Tailgate Show. We're going to be at the Floor Bama recording our show Friday from 1 to 4. We're going to be at the Big Floor Bama, and you guys are definitely welcome to come by and hang with Jake Coker and me, because that's where we'll be. And then you can hear the show Saturday right here on WNSP from 9 to 11. But we'll preview it and then, help you get to kickoff that night. Should be a lot of fun for Alabama. And I know there'll be a bunch of Bama fans that go to Baton Rouge to watch this game. All right, let's talk about some of the other games in the SEC that took place this past weekend. And the reason I want to do that is just so that we can kind of get an idea of where things sit in the SEC, not even as much the college football playoff, but just the SEC, because it's so interesting right now. Florida put up a fight, but they lost to Georgia. So Georgia's now 7-1, and all of a sudden they're at the top of the SEC again. So they were able to kind of climb back up after losing to Alabama, and they're back to, being the number 2 team in the country, obviously after the win over Texas. But they continue to play good. Tennessee outlasted Kentucky 28-18, so they're a 4-1 team in the SEC. They still have Georgia ahead of them on the schedule, so that's going to be a tough game. They struggled against Kentucky, but put them away late. The biggest surprise to some people, maybe not as much to me because I thought this was going to happen, but South Carolina, the Jekyll and Hyde team in the SEC, pounded Texas A&M. So the Aggies were in first place in the SEC, and now all of a sudden, they're tied, still up there at 5-1, a 44-20 loss. Ole Miss blew out Arkansas 63-31. And there's been a kind of a shift in the polls, and we'll talk about that as well. And then Vanderbilt beat Auburn. What a really bad start to his coaching career down on the plains for Hugh Freeze. And what a story Vanderbilt is. Now 6-3, 3-2 in the SEC. They've beaten Alabama and Auburn in the same season, and they still have some more upsets under their belt. But they're a really, really well-coached team. They play smart football. And then Mississippi State was a 45-20 winner. So that's kind of where things are right now. And now standing wise, when you look at the SEC, it's really interesting because there's so many teams that have a chance to beat the winner of the conference, or at least tied, right? So you got Georgia and Texas A&M at 5-1. Tennessee's 4-1. Texas, LSU are 3-1. And then Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, and Bama are 3-2. And there's a scenario where you could have like a logjam of teams at the top of the conference with 2 losses this year, just depending on how things play out. But this Bama LSU game is just so important because the loser of that game is, for all intents and purposes, out of that conversation and out of the college football playoff conversation as well. So this is what you love. 4 games left, no more bye weeks for Alabama. It's a sprint to the finish. What's going to happen? I'm going to talk a little bit about Jalen Milroe on the show, who was so great against Georgia and then has struggled to throw the football and really to run the football as well until the second half of that Missouri game. But is that a game plan for Alabama? And then the other question is, could the guy come back and be the quarterback for Alabama, or is he going to want to come back because his draft stock has sunk so much since he has struggled over the last 3 games? So since that win over Georgia, I didn't think he was bad against Vandy, but the Tennessee game was bad. Didn't play great against South Carolina. And then the first half against Missouri wasn't good. But he did have a good second half. But he was like the Heisman Trophy favorite after the Georgia game, and now he's not even on the board anymore, as far as Vegas is concerned. And then when you factor in the draft, he's slipped all the way down to 5th or 6th best quarterback in the draft. So that he's going the wrong direction. So he's got 4 games to get it figured out, and then maybe the playoff or bowl game. So 5 or more. But at the same time, it's such an interesting story. And to me, it just feels like he's just got to run the ball a little bit more. But quarterback play for Alabama, which was so good against Georgia, has slipped off. And when you go back and you watch the Georgia game, he was so accurate. I think that he was off target like 3% of his throws. The South Carolina game, the Tennessee game was like 17+%. So, something's going on there. They say he's healthy, so it's not an injury issue. I thought it might be that. Who knows? They're not going to tell you if the quarterback's hurt, but the play just has dropped off so much. And that has really surprised me because, obviously he's such a good player and someone that's such a difference maker. So Bama against LSU, 6:30 on Saturday. And it feels like of the games that are on the schedule, that's definitely a big one. The other one that's going to be interesting is Ole Miss hosting Georgia, and that being the 2:30 game. And Lane Kiffin came out after our show last week, but he was talking about how do you give LSU another night game. Why not give us the night game? Maybe our fans want to go out and friends too, and go out and get, get liquored up and drink some beers out on the Grove, and then come in and make a bunch of noise at night, instead of giving them the night game because of the reputation down at LSU. He made that, something to that effect. I mean, he didn't say liquored up or anything, but the reputation that they have down in Baton Rouge, right? And so it's an advantage for LSU to play that night game. But Alabama's always seemed to have they always have played well at LSU. It's a place where, remember when Bear Bryant was coaching, it hardly ever lost. And then that streak was like winning or not losing. So I guess you could put some ties in there. But down in Baton Rouge lasted all the way until Saban was LSU's head coach, in the early 2000s. And then Saban kind of swung back in and at Alabama, and Bama started their winning ways. So it's been a weird series where the road team has played better than the home team has over the years. But this Saturday, Alabama looked so bad against Tennessee. You wonder if they're going to be able to just go in there and not make a bunch of penalties. And I think that's, to me, the biggest issue that this team has is discipline. And you have to be disciplined when you're out there in front of a big crowd like that, not jumping off sides, not holding, and not getting a bunch of penalties. The last time Bama was there was the game that Bryce Young and Alabama lost at the end on the 2-point conversion. That was kind of a really turning point victory for Brian Kelly. And now, this is a game where Brian Kelly's looking for another win against Alabama, and for Bama's new coach, Kalen DeBoer, I mean, he's trying to win against his rivals, and if you lose this game and you start losing to your rivals, then Bama fans aren't going to be happy. And he already lost to Tennessee. So we're going to get into that and more. Thanks for hanging out with us here on WNSP. I'm Mick Gillispie. We'll talk more Monday quarterback, Alabama football, right after this. Welcome back on Monday quarterback. Mick Gillispie in for Jake Coker, who is on assignment. He'll be back on the show next week. All right, let's talk about this LSU and Alabama matchup. And I love the fact that this game means a lot. 4 games left in the season, because this has been one of the most fun rivalries that the SEC has had, really since, like I said, last segment on the show, Nick Saban took over as coach of Alabama. And you could really see a shift in the power when he came in, and finally Alabama in 2008 with Julio Jones and company beat LSU. And that was kind of the beginning of Alabama dominating the SEC. They beat them. They hadn't beaten Auburn in a while. They beat them, kind of knocked them out, and then they beat Tim Tebow in Florida in 2009. And it's been Alabama's conference up until Nick Saban left. Really, Kirby going to Georgia kind of shifted the power a little bit. But this has been one of the fun rivalries. It's been a game that we've called the game of the century. These teams met in the national championship in 2011. There was a game in Tuscaloosa that the Tigers won, and then Alabama beat LSU in that title in the Dome in New Orleans, 21-0. And that was Alabama's second national championship under Nick Saban. I was there for that one. A.J. McCarron, Mobile's own, was the quarterback. Trent Richardson was on that team, and it was one of the best defenses in college football history. Really, both teams had great defenses. But so this game's meant a lot, and it means a lot this time, but it's just different coaches. Brian Kelly and Kalen DeBoer. And for DeBoer, this is why he took the job, but it's also different. I mean, went to Tennessee, and Alabama did not play well, and they lost to one of their rivals. So this is the second rivalry game for Alabama. For Alabama to win this game, I feel like it comes down to 3 different factors. And I think this is the thing that has held Alabama back, or these 3 things have held Alabama back. So for them to compete and win this and run the table, they're going to have to do three things, I really feel like, to get there. And the first one, and maybe the most important one, is that they're going to have to be disciplined. The stuff that happened at the end of the Vanderbilt game with Malachi Moore kicking the football and throwing his mouthpiece and all that, and then the Kendrick Law personal foul at the end of the Tennessee game was just ridiculous. And that's what losing teams do. And I'll give Alabama credit for bouncing back after that and picking up a victory. But at the same time, they've got to be more disciplined. And I think that also goes with being more disciplined with the penalties. They've got to do a better job of limiting the penalties. The false starts, and it's hard when you're out there and it's so loud, and it'll be loud Saturday in Baton Rouge. And then on top of that, the holding penalties. Bama's one of the most penalized teams in the conference. They're going to have to get more disciplined. And if this team's going to turn the corner, that's an area to me that is really important. The second thing is that Jalen Milroe's got to run the football. I mean, you remember last year against LSU, he had some of the biggest runs of the season. Jaden Daniels was the quarterback for the Tigers. You had Malik Neighbors, the wide receiver. He was so good. They were so talented, but yet it was Jalen Milroe running that really just broke the difference between these two teams. And then Daniels got hurt in that football game. But even before that, it was really an exciting game where you saw two excellent quarterbacks on display. And for Milroe, he was running the football. But Milroe has not run the ball effectively except the second half of Missouri. And to me, that's one of the reasons that Alabama struggled. So a lot of people have asked me, what is that? I felt like he was injured, and that's why he didn't run the football. But I've been told by, multiple sources that he wasn't injured. So I don't know. But when he runs the ball, that's what makes him dynamic. That's what makes him a difference maker. He's not going to be a drop back quarterback. He just isn't. And when he tries to stay in the pocket, or teams' defenses are able to contain him in the pocket, he becomes just very average. But when he throws running the ball, does the RPOs effectively, and gets a lot of different receivers involved, he can be one of the best quarterbacks in football. And we saw that in the Georgia game. So I think that he's definitely got to run the football effectively for Alabama to win and to win this game against LSU. I think the third thing for Alabama is that the offensive line's got to do a better job of protecting Milroe, not letting him get hit so much in the pocket. Whether it's Pritchett missing a block and somebody blindsiding him, or just too many guys to block and they come at him. They need to protect him a little bit better. The offensive line has a lot of talent. You got Booker, who's the best player on the team. And you just hope that maybe Roberts is a little healthier after the bye week. Brailsford's been so good at the center spot. But Alabama's offensive line has got to step up. I mean, this was the group going into the season that we said, hey, they're the most most effective group coming in. They're the group that you feel like is going to be the cornerstone of this year's team. And really, they just haven't lived up to that standard. They have been very inconsistent and probably the biggest disappointment. But there's 4 games left. And if they can get healthy, maybe that's been part of the issue. If they can get on the same page with Milroe, this season could turn into the type of season that Alabama fans want. And Auburn fans, you're not going to want to hear this, but this Alabama team has the potential to beat any single team in college football. They can beat any of them. And this team has the talent to win the national championship. They could run the table, and that's what it's going to take. But they've got to get that offensive line play better. And I think that if you get the offensive line better, playing better, protecting Milroe better, he runs the ball, and you just be a lot more disciplined, and good things could happen and would happen for the Alabama Crimson Tide. So Alabama and LSU match up on Saturday in Death Valley. I know a lot of you guys that are listening right now will be driving over for the game. It is a short drive from here. But after the game, I'll be on Cover Crimson YouTube channel, taking your calls live, talking about the game, breaking it down. We do that every single Alabama game. So check us out on YouTube right after the game on Cover Crimson on YouTube. And make you, if you want to call in, call in. Like if you want to listen, listen. But it's a lot of fun. It'll be a little late just because it's a 6:30 kickoff, but we'll be there live afterwards. All right. When we come back, we'll talk more Alabama and SEC football Monday quarterback, always right here on WNSP in Mobile. I'm Mick Gillispie, thanking you guys for hanging out with us and also saying, hey, we'll be back, Jake Coker and I both, on Saturday from 9 to 11 with the Bama Tailgate show. And we'll be at Floor Bama on Friday from 1 to 4 recording that show. So come on down and see us. We'll be right back. Hey guys, welcome back to Monday Quarterback. Mick Gillispie talking to you today. Jake Coker, our actual quarterback on assignment. He'll be back next Monday to talk Alabama and LSU and maybe even some Alabama and Mercer as we go down the stretch run here of the 2024 season. It's really hard. It goes by so fast. Like we wait for it, and then it gets here, and then all of a sudden it's like, boom, we're here we are talking football. But this is an interesting matchup. The spread is just about even. Bama's a slight favorite over LSU. Winner is alive for the college football playoff with both teams heavily favored in their final 3 contests. But this one's a toss-up, and it'll be interesting to see how Jalen Milroe and the Tide are able to go into Baton Rouge and take care of business. All right. Both polls are out now, the AP Top 25 and the coaches poll. And Alabama's up to number 11. So they go up 3 spots without even playing. Part of that was, teams that lost, including Penn State, that was defeated. And it's kind of the same Penn State that we always see. They played Ohio State on Saturday. They're never good enough. They're always kind of in the picture, but they're just not legitimate contenders because they can't beat the best teams, and that includes Ohio State. So they slid down 4 spots in the coaches and 3 spots in the AP, but not past Bama. Notre Dame slipped down to number 10, which is weird because it's like they're 7-1, so they didn't lose, but they went down. And then Bama goes up 3 spots in both polls, and they didn't even play. So it's kind of interesting how that works. But Alabama's number 11 right now. It's an interesting top 25 because Indiana's having the best season that they've had in like forever. They're 9-0. BYU's still undefeated, and they're in the top 10. Miami is undefeated, and they're in the top 4 now. So it's like some teams that you really haven't heard from in a while in the top 12. And now it's not being in the top 12 that guarantees you're in the college football playoff. Some of the stuff has to do with who wins their conference and all of that stuff. But the way that the math works for Alabama and LSU is that this game's really going to help either team that wins and probably gets them into the college football playoff. I don't know if it's assured, but I think it's pretty much assured that the winner of this game will make it. So LSU 13 in the coaches and 14 in the AP. Oregon is still number 1 and number 1 in both polls. The only first place vote that they didn't get was given to Georgia in the coaches poll. Everybody else has them with all the first place votes. And look, they beat Ohio State by a point, and they're a pretty good football team. Another team trying to stay alive is Ole Miss, and they went up in the polls as well after going to Arkansas and just destroying the Hogs. And I don't know, I didn't see that coming after the way that Arkansas played against Tennessee. I thought, well, you know what, that'll be a game where Ole Miss will have trouble moving the football, but they didn't. And, they scored. They just kept scoring. So Bama's up to number 11, and they'll play number 14 or number 13 LSU, depending on which poll you look at, coming up on Saturday. Some other big games, though, in the SEC that will take place this weekend, and games we talked about already, a second ago, but that are really significant. That for Ole Miss, it's a big game playing against Georgia. They lose that game to Georgia and they're out. And think about all the money that they spent NIL wise to contend and the transfer portal and going out there and being able to put together a team that they felt like could contend in this conference, which is so tough. And they did it, and then they lost to Kentucky, which is the loss that I really feel like hurts them so much. But that's going to be a fun game. It's a 2.5-point spread, so the odds makers feel like Ole Miss has a very good chance against Georgia this year. The over/under is 45.5, so it's really Ole Miss's great offense against Georgia's great defense. Texas is hosting Florida. You would have figured brand-wise, this one would be the game that you would look at and go, hey, man, I mean, I got to see this. But Florida had lost their second-string quarterback in the game against Georgia. So they're now down to their third-string guy, and they're 21.5-point underdogs against the Horns. Vanderbilt hosts South Carolina. That's another game where Vandy's in the top 25 now after beating Auburn, and they're an underdog at home to South Carolina, who is Jekyll and Hyde. This would be the perfect game for South Carolina to lose by like 3 touchdowns. I mean, they're just so hard to predict, but Vanderbilt bowl eligible and, looking to continue their really surprising season. And then Mississippi State's at Tennessee. Over under in that one, 61.5, and Tennessee's a 23.5-point favorite. And then this is like an old Big 12 game. Oklahoma at Missouri, and that's a 6:45 game. So that's like right after the Bama LSU game kicks off. That one will go as well. And then when you look at games in college football in the top 25, you're not looking at a whole lot of beef on the schedule. Now, Indiana plays Michigan. That's a test for the Hoosiers. I mean, that gets them 10 wins if they're able to find a way to beat Michigan, and they're 14-point favorites at home against the defending national champions, which is crazy. Another team I wanted to talk about was Army. My father was in the Army. It's such a really cool deal to see Army undefeated right now, and they're number 18 in the country. So they play North Texas. They're only a 5-point favorite, but just hope to see those guys. That would be awesome if Army found a way to run the table, but and they'll do that. Colorado and Coach Prime up to number 21. They'll play Texas Tech. They're a 3-point favorite on the road. They're 6-2 right now. So Deion Sanders doing an excellent job as a head coach, and we'll see if that continues. But and then maybe really the surprise of the college football season is number 10 Notre Dame hosting Florida State. Florida State, if you didn't know this, they're 1-8 this year. 1-8. And they are 26.5-point underdogs taking on Notre Dame. So, looking through the schedule, those are the games that kind of stuck out to me. Bama takes on LSU, and I want to talk more about that matchup here on Monday Quarterback and kind of what to expect when these two teams hit the field, because it's an interesting matchup. You got two quarterbacks that are projected to go in the NFL draft. You've got, I think, two of the best wide receivers again in college football on both sides, which is also really interesting. And I don't know how LSU does it, but it always seems like they have like a difference maker at that wide receiver spot. And part of that to me is development. It's obviously recruiting, but maybe some of it's luck. I don't know. I mean, but they always have somebody. I thought Malik Neighbors last year, watching him play wide receiver was amazing. I mean, he was so good. And, and this year you got Lacey, who's been one of the best and most fun players to watch in college football as well. And Alabama's going to have their work cut out trying to defend them. Garrett Nussmeier is kind of known as a little bit of a riverboat gambler, right? I mean, and just his ability to go out there and throw the football, and he's not afraid to sling it around. Now, he has made some mistakes, throwing 9 interceptions, but he's got 20 touchdowns, and he's exciting to watch throw the football for LSU just because he's not afraid to throw it. And he's dangerous in the fact that he's got some great targets to try to throw the football to. But um, he's thrown for over 2,000 yards this year, and Kyron Lacy's been the guy that I was telling you about before. 6 touchdowns for Lacy and 618 yards receiving. And the other guy, and Alabama fans, you know this guy, Aaron Anderson. He was the one that was at Alabama and transferred. And I think that when Nick Saban was talking about someone transferring a couple of years ago, well, because he was like basically saying, "Hey, you were going to get playing time," and he was disappointed to see him go. I felt like it was Aaron Anderson. This year, he's got 614 total yards and 4 touchdowns, and that was a guy that came to Alabama, and Bama had a tough time utilizing him. And, maybe he didn't feel like he was getting the ball enough. Maybe he didn't feel like that he was being utilized the way he wanted to be utilized. But because of that, he transferred out and went to LSU. So he was from that area, and he ended up going there, and he's had statistically a really good season, only 4 yards less than Lacy. But there's other guys that you're going to see too that can make plays. And for Alabama, I mean, there's just a lot of guys you got to worry about. Mason Taylor's another guy who's caught a lot of passes this year and has a couple of touchdowns, and they LSU is able to get the ball to a lot of different players and do some damage there. I don't think they're as effective in the run game as they are in the pass game. Durham and Williams are two guys that you'll see a lot run the football. But the guy that I thought was going to have a big year, John Emery Jr., got hurt at the beginning of the season. So LSU's without him. So that's kind of a look at the Tigers. When we come back, I'm going to look at Bama, and we'll talk about how Bama could match up against these guys and where Alabama's strengths and weaknesses are against LSU. More Monday Quarterback coming up right after this. Final segment of Monday Quarterback, and I want to thank all of our friends over at Sticks Tractor and Tree for making our show possible. You can count on Sticks Tractor and Tree Service in Robertsdale for professional tree services by responsible, reliable, and effective tree service technicians. When they say that, they mean it. I mean, I got to tell you guys this. I mean, I had a tree that was built into the deck of my house. It was probably 75 feet tall, and it was part of it was leaning over one of our bedrooms, and I just never felt comfortable with it. It's a water oak. If it was a live oak, I'd probably be a lot more comfortable, but I just had a bad feeling. And so I had Hunter come over from Sticks, give me an estimate. There were some other water oaks. They were damaged during Hurricane Sally. And there's a lot of like big branches falling on stuff. And the day that I got this house, there was a branch that went through the roof, and so there's a lot of issues with these trees. And he came in with his guys. He gave me a one price to get all the trees out, and some of them were 90 feet tall. The guys came in, got the job done. They had the big green machine, this thing that like that grabs the tree, cuts it, takes it down. No damage was done to my deck, my house, and the trees are gone. And when they cut that tree down out of the deck, the entire center of it was hollow. So it was a blessing. So anyway, they're good guys. You can trust them. The rate was fantastic. They do land clearing, excavating, mulching, tractor work, demolition, site prep, all that. And they're located right over here on the Eastern Shore. And you can give them a call at 251-367-1081. But tell them you heard about them right here on Monday Quarterback. Ask for Hunter, and they'll take good care of you. All right, let's talk a little bit of football as we go down the backstretch of this matchup. How is Alabama going to win this football game? I think that's what most of us are worried about. I know there's some Tiger fans in town, and they're probably saying, well, how are we going to beat Alabama? Alabama has to take care of the football. Jalen Milroe this year has been kind of Jekyll and Hyde. He's looked really, really good throwing the football. And then some games he's looked really, really bad. But 13 touchdowns, 6 interceptions throwing the ball, and a 67.49 completion percentage, right? The passing has really been, a little bit of a letdown. He's got to get the ball to Ryan Williams. Jeremy Bernard has been a great target for him as well. But when he's his best, he's spreading the ball around and getting it to a lot of other people. CJ Dupree, the tight ends, a big drop off from Ryan Williams. And there's no one that really stands out besides Williams as far as yards go. Williams, one of the top receivers in the SEC. He's got 7 touchdowns, 35 catches, 702 yards. And then Bernard, who's really started to come into his own the last couple of games with a couple of touchdown catches. But it would be great to see Kobe Prentice make some catches. And the other guy is Kendrick Law, who has spent some time banged up, but he's not only important as a guy that can catch the ball, but he's also someone who's able to block, and the blocking, doing the little things right, really helps Alabama. Now, I said the offensive line's got to be effective for the Tide, and for that to happen, you would expect Alabama's run game to follow. And when you look at the statistics for Alabama on the ground this year, it's really a 3-player approach, right? And it starts with Jalen Milroe to me. Milroe's got 12 touchdowns on the ground. And when you get in the red zone, he's so hard to defend because of his ability to run the football. And he'll run it in or hand it off. And the last game, you really started to see some of the special ability that Justice Haynes has. And think about that run where he bounced off of a guy, ran over someone. Him and Jam Miller are two kind of like the 1-2 punch for Alabama on the ground. And those guys are super crucial. Those 3 guys running the football for Alabama to really be able to help them affect this game and score some points. Now, on defense, the front 7 for Alabama has been fantastic. And I think that they're led by LT Overton, who's the transfer from Texas A&M, but he's been really a fantastic player for Alabama. If he's not in the backfield making a sack, he's affecting plays. And just for him, it's just getting back there, maybe just finish a little bit more, but he's been back there a lot. Tim Smith and Jamarian Latham have been excellent as well. Those guys are going to have to step up. But the funny thing is that when Keon Sabb went down, we started to see this guy, Bray Hubbard, a lot. And this guy has graded out as one of the best safeties in football, he and Malachi Moore. So Bama's secondary, which when you lose Caleb Downs, you know that it's going to be really difficult to replace one of the best players that you've ever had. But they've been able to do that. And I'm definitely curious to see, how that continues for the Crimson Tide as they head down to Baton Rouge to play LSU. Again, we'll do the Tailgate show, which you guys can listen to right here on WNSP Saturday from 9 to 11. And that's every Alabama Saturday. You can listen to our show with Jake Coker and me, Mick Gillispie. But if you want, come hang out with us. We're gonna do the show Friday. We'll record it down at the Floribama. We'll be in the big Floribama. We did one from the Old River Grill, and then we did one from their restaurant Coastal. And then we're planning on going over there. Don't be surprised if Ryan Anderson isn't there with us, the former NFL and Bama standout. And Jay Coker and we always have a bunch of great guests that make it out there as well. But we'd love to see you. You'll be able to hear the show and hang out with us, so you can get a Bushwhacker, a Yingling Lager, maybe put a little Screwball peanut butter whiskey topper on, or maybe just have a Coke and some oysters. But come down and hang with us. We'll be putting the show on Friday at the Floribama. So I want to thank everyone for hanging out with us, and have a great week. It's just going to be a fun week of football. You can catch Jake and I on our podcast, Elephant in the Room. We record twice a week on the Cover Crimson YouTube channel. And then I'm on daily on the Bama Tailgate YouTube channel. So do a lot of digital stuff, but I'll tell you what, man, I still absolutely, positively love being on the radio. And I just, there's something special about being able to talk on the radio, and grew up listening to the radio. And so it's really been a lot of fun hanging out with you guys here and talking about football. each week and kind of recapping games and previewing the next games. But anyway, I'm Mick Gillispie at Broadcaster Mick on the socials for Jake Coker, who will be back next week. We appreciate all of you guys, and we will talk to you then. And until then, roll tide.